Hi guys, it's me, Kenny Atomic, and I want to thank you guys for stopping by and watching this video. If you're my aunties, hey, what's up aunties? If you're my mom, hey mom. But anyways, so this video is actually going to be very different today, and it's also kind of me coming back into the channel, hopefully a bit more regularly. So you're probably wondering, Ken, where the hell have you been for this time? Well, good news, I've been working on videos. Bad news is, I've been working on videos not for this channel. Boo this man! So we're actually going to be doing something pretty darn different today. So I'm actually going to be talking about horror movies and why I love them and stuff like that. And why I felt that in 2022, this was the best year of horror movies. In a way, where I actually felt like horror. I'll explain it to you just a bit before I get into the video essay that I worked my butt off making in a way, and I realized that video essays are fun to watch, but they are really hard to make. So when I see people that make like hour-long video essays, I'm like, God damn, that is a lot of work. I wish I could do that and not be beat up by kids every day. But I digress. I felt like in 2022 was a great year for horror movies due to the fact that I felt like horror movies were fun in a way. I just felt like we were just having fun again and not really taking ourselves so serious. But don't get me wrong, I love serious horror movies and I love elevated horror movies, but it just kind of felt like it came to a point where elevated horror movies were just like the norm in a way, and they were just like patting themselves on the back so much that I felt like you could have actually lost something really good within a horror movie because you were just out the loop of what the director was thinking at the time. Yeah, man, so I really enjoyed the movie, but I really had no idea what the ending was really all about. It just kind of made no sense to me when they threw the baby at the end. Oh, did the movie hurt your brain? Well, listen up, I'm going to explain it to you. You probably should be watching more intelligent movies, you dumbass. So anyways, the main reason of this movie, I'm explaining to you for your small brain, is that it's basically talking about placenta and how we are, as society, are affected by placenta. And placenta is basically a placeholder for the patriarchy and how we're basically all covered in it. Once we enter this world, we are covered in placenta. And that's what happens. And you don't understand it because you don't watch thought-provoking movies. You watch those stupid Marvel movies and all the time. Yeah, your cinematic universe doesn't mean shit when it comes to art and thought-provoking movies, you dumbass. Real cinephile will understand what's going on with that. But you are not a real cinephile. You're just a lame nugget brain. You're a sheep. You don't understand. That's right. I called you a sheep. Loser. You fucking loser. Are we sure we watched the same movie? And so, with this video, I'm going to be talking about my feelings on elevated horror and why I felt that the year 2022 just felt like regular horror, and I loved it. And so yeah, let's get started.
Horror had one of the best years when it came to genre films. It was a genre that I felt would do okay and we would get some gems, and I was expecting the superhero genre to fly high as usual. And personally, I enjoyed everything that came out the superhero genre. But I would be lying to say that the genre has been subjective for many people. When it came to horror, it was dropping banger after banger. The horror genre in 2022 had some breakout movies that I believe will be future classics within the coming years. With that being said, there's something that makes this year of horror so special. It felt like horror. I'm going to explain this. For the past couple of years, if you paid attention to the horror scene, there's been a certain type of horror movie that has dominated the conversation, and that would be elevated horror. For those who aren't in the loop, elevated horror, defined by Ryan Ladizino from IndieWire, who describes it as horror that is imbued their storytelling with metaphor and strong craftsmanship over jump scares and schlocky twists. Examples of this type of movie would be Hereditary, Midsommar, The Lighthouse, The Babadook, It Comes at Night. The most mainstream one that everyone would be aware of would be Jordan Peele's Get Out. I would argue it isn't in the elevated genre due to some of its fantastical elements, but it dances within the elevated spectrum. Elevated horror movies kind of had the same type of thematic skeleton. The movies usually involve a protagonist particularly white, who are upper middle class or extremely well off. The characters have experienced something traumatic that has shaken their view on life. The movie takes place in a very extreme setting, either that's Forest Green or one specific location the majority of the film takes place. The horror never uses jump scares or over-the-top death scenes, and the last 20 minutes of an elevator horror movie usually involves the director throwing every crazy visual that they can think of to get an emotion out of the audience. The monster, or the horror, is usually a metaphor for society, trauma, or a metaphor that has to do with sexism and the patriarchy. Obviously, I must acknowledge that horror movies have always been metaphor movies. The one that comes to mind for me most recently is The Wolfman starring Lon Chaney Jr. providing a metaphor for the Jewish experience in Nazi Germany, Dawn of the Dead by George A. Romero being a metaphor for consumerism, and Gaijira being a metaphor about the horrors of nuclear war. So horror has always been allegorical since the beginning. The problem with elevated horror is that the message is buried so deep within the film that you either have to be a film scholar to understand it, or the director itself that has to say the message about what the film is actually about. Now, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy elevator horror, and I enjoy a lot of the movies that come out of it. Some of my favorites have to be, we need to talk about Kevin, Hereditary, The Witch, Suspiria from 2008, Raw, and last but not least, Climax. There's no problem with elevator horror as a subgenre, but it feels like the genre has been dominating the conversation when it comes to horror. I think another problem is that most elevator horror movies come from the same studio, A24. A24 is a great studio, and they make some amazing movies, but their horror movies all kind of have garnered this aura of pretentiousness that's kind of ridiculous in my opinion. Horror movies that A24 produces give off the potential of being possible Oscar nominations that movies like Rosemary's Baby, The Silence of the Lambs, The Exorcist, and American Psycho provide. I feel like elevated horror movies want to be part of that prestigious crowd and surf off the waves of horror to how a celebrity who would incorporate elements of a different culture to gain praise. A scenario that comes to mind for me, it just felt like the Babadook and Payman were the popular kids at school, and Jason and Freddy Krueger were considered the nerds. It felt like this is going to be the norm from now on. Luckily, in 2022, changed my doom review and brought more of an optimistic view, because in 2022, I felt like this is the year where horror didn't feel so elevated and just felt like regular horror. For this video, I'm going to talk about 3 of my favorite movies that came out this year: Barbarian, Pearl and X, and Terrifier 2. Let's address the elephant in the room and acknowledge that Pearl and X are 2 completely different movies, but I argue that they are both 2 sides of the same coin, and I'll talk about them and why I feel like these movies bring back a sense of old school horror and how they still provide deep social metaphors that you could still find in an elevated horror movie. I know it's very ironic to talk about 2 A24 movies when I spent the first half of this video talking about my critiques and criticisms of A24 horror movies. I will argue that Pearl and X are movies that are the outliers when it comes to their horror catalog. Both movies invoke a certain tone of past Hollywood aesthetics, and Pearl and X feel like love letters to their respective decades. Let's break them down. Pearl follows a story of titular character Pearl, who has dreams of becoming a movie star in the early 20th century, and her ambition's so strong that she's willing to do anything to make them a reality. The movie is a fever dream in a kind of way. Ty West does something spectacular by combining old school early golden age Hollywood movies and blending them with the violence and shock of a 70s 80s horror movie. It's a real spectacle to see, and it gives off vibes of what happened to Baby Jane in Wizard of Oz, surprisingly. The movie is also shot beautifully with a lot of colors popping out, particularly the color red. The story can be seen as a cautionary tale of the dangers of dreaming too big, as well as being put into an environment that does not support your dreams. Pearl, the main character, is a very tragic woman because you want to see her succeed and achieve her goals of being a movie star, but you start to see little cracks within her personality that start to reveal something very dark. I would describe Pearl as a mixture of Dorothy and Annie Wilkes with a mixture of Nina Sayer from Black Swan. Mia Goth really sells this performance, I feel, because you start to really empathize with her ambitions, as well as you are also terrified by the things that she is able to do. When it comes to X, the movie wears its inspirations proudly on its sleeves, with heavy inspiration from movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Last House on the Left, and I would even say the first Friday the 13th. The movie follows a porn crew trying to shoot their breakout feature on Pearl's family farm. When the porn crew comes to set up for their movie, it starts to anger Pearl and she starts to unleash her killer urges again. Now somewhere between her late 80s and early 90s, it seems like, has become a woman who is saddened and isolated due to the fact that she can no longer achieve the dreams that she wanted oh so long ago. Now her husband does not view her in a loving way as he used to as well. X plays into the phobias and uncertainties when it comes to aging and getting older, and not being able to pursue dreams that you always wanted to. This is a common fear that I think is very relatable to a lot of people from all walks of life. X, from how I interpret it, is a cautionary tale to live the life that you want to and find ways to achieve those goals before it's too late and you become a homicidal, horny grandmother. I'm gonna say it loud and proud, I love slasher movies. I love mass killers causing havoc on helpless teenagers with crazy kills or dangerous death traps. And the genre has just been one of my go-to comfort horror movie genres. I love Friday the 13th, I love giallo flicks, I've watched about so many slasher films up in October that I kind of lost count. And with that love, I can honestly say that I feel the slasher genre has been served unfairly over the past 2 decades. But that all kind of changed in the 2020s with Terrifier 2. Terrifier 2, directed by Damien Leone, is one of those examples where style over substance is a really good thing. The movie takes place after the events of the first movie, where we follow our main horror antagonist, Art the Clown, as he stalks the Shaw family. The youngest member of the family, Jonathan Shaw, has an obsession with Art that slowly to tie closely to his family in ways they really wish hadn't. Everything about this movie just screams a love letter to the slasher genre. Every kill becomes more over the top than the last one, and throughout its 2-hour and 18-minute runtime, you're taken on a ride of pure chaotic horror madness. Terrifier 2 just felt like a godsend. I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of horror movies that I've seen and what we've gotten over the years, but this movie just felt like it was catching up with an old friend that you haven't seen in a long time. It felt like the type of horror that you thought you would never see again, and that's what makes it so special in my opinion. Even with how crazy the movie's violence comes across, there is a hidden message about the power of love and family. This can be seen with Laura LaViera's character of Sienna, who goes through hell and back to protect her family from Art the Clown, especially when it comes to Jonathan. She comes off as being a distant and troubled character, reeling from the death of her father, but deep down, she is still very protective of her friends and family all around her. The last movie I'm going to talk about has to be my favorite horror movie of 2022, and that has to be Barbarian. Barbarian, directed by Zach Krieger, follows the story of Tess, who just so happens to be stuck in her Airbnb in Detroit, but there's someone else also living there as well, who also booked the same Airbnb. As the two start to make sense of the whole situation, Tess slowly starts to discover that there is something dark hiding in this small house and has more troubling secrets that go back decades. If Terrifier 2 scratched my itch for a straight up slasher movie, I would say that Barbarian satisfied my needs for a straight up monster movie. Within the last decade, I can only say that there's only been one horror movie monster that has straight up impressed me, and that had to be the Blair Witch in the 2016 reboot. But besides that, I really felt like there was a lack of good horror movie monsters. We've had ghosts and demons within the past decades, but a straight up monster was something that I feel like we were really dying for when it came to horror movies. The movie tells a very interesting story about gentrification and how outsiders who buy into these communities don't really understand or care about the history of those areas. And it shows how people try to buy into these communities just to make a quick buck, substantial passive income. The movie is really good. Really good. Going into the movie blind, I really had no idea what to expect because I didn't even see a trailer for it. all I really saw was just the poster and how everyone was claiming that this movie is a tour de force when it comes to horror. So I was literally blown away, and everything that they said about this movie was true, and I'm very happy that it was. I feel like it also had one of the most memorable characters. To me, has to be Justin's Long portrayal as a disgraced film actor / director, and how he goes about the story and the actions that he takes are kind of scumbaggery to a new level of scumbaggery. And so it was just very entertaining to see him and how his story plays out. The environment that the movie takes place in of Brightmoor is run down and in many ways is similar to a ghost town in the Old West. The movie also wants you to know that there are still people living in these areas and they're still trying to survive the economic downfalls of a neoliberal 21st century, and how many unanswered crimes of the past grow into something twisted and demented. The movie takes place in Michigan, which I find interesting because not a lot of movies take place in Michigan, so it's always really interesting to see. Because from my personal knowledge of movies, the only time when the movie takes place in the Midwest, it usually involves states like Ohio or Illinois, so having the movie take place in Detroit was kind of refreshing. The movie also kind of, in some ways, made me a bit curious on why the setting, because in a lot of movies, Detroit has kind of gotten this metaphor from what I've seen in movies as a city about the forgotten and the abandoned, and just as crushed dreams of what could have been. And as someone who has been in the city for almost 20 years of his life and's basically grown up around the area, it kind of gives me mixed feelings because I have seen the growth of the city in the area, but I've always just been curious on how that message extends to a broader audience in a way.
And this is where I'm going to end my video essay. So I just want to say I love horror movies, regardless if they're elevated, giallo, slashers, thrillers, demonic. I love them all. But I felt like the year of 2022 was so refreshing in a way because it just kind of felt like the old school horror movies that I love from the 70s and 80s and even to the 90s in a way. And don't get me wrong, I do love A24 movies. I'm going to see Beau is Afraid, and I'm going to see literally anything that they will make for my film nerd heart. But I just felt like out of all the great strides that men and women out of the elevated horror genre have done in a way, I just felt like they were just oversaturating the market in a way.
Oh shit, dude, I'm sorry. Goddamn wind. Fuck.
To get a horror movie out and go into a make a scene and kind of just like dilute the colors in a way of the fun originality of the past in a way to go and package yourself into something more palatable for the future in a way. And I felt like in a way horror movie was kind of losing its freak flag. I'm gonna try to stop saying the word like, but it's very hard, so bear with me. If you feel like it's cringy, I feel cringe too for you. So we're in the cringe together.
Cringe together.
As I get back to it, horror movies just felt fun this year, and I'm really happy for it. So in the year 2023, I hope we just have more fun horror movies and more elevated horror movies that are also fun too, because I feel like you can also do both. You can have fun elevated horror and also have just regular horror. And so in a way, I am looking forward to 2023 and basically all of just regular horror that's fun. Thanks again for watching this video. It's a bit longer than what I usually make, but I just want to say thanks again, and please be sure to like, share, and twerk on that subscribe button. Thanks again, and peace.